History of Islam.
The history of Islam concerns the religion of Islam and its adherents, Muslims. Muslim is an Arabic word meaning one who submits to God. Muslims and their religion have greatly impacted the political, economic, and military history of the Old World, especially the Middle East, where its roots lie. Though it is believed by non-Muslims to have originated in Mecca and Medina, Muslims believe that the religion of Islam has been present since the time of the Prophet Adam. The Islamic world expanded to include people of the Islamic civilization, inclusive of non-Muslims living in that civilization. A century after the death of last Islamic prophet Muhammad, the Islamic Empire extended from Spain in the west to Indus in the east. The subsequent empires such as those of the Abbasids, Fatimids, Almoravids, Seljukids, Erguvan, Adal and Warzangali in Somalia, Mughals in India and Safavids in Persia and Ottomans were among the influential and distinguished powers in the world. The Islamic civilization gave rise to many centers of culture and science and produced notable scientists, astronomers, mathematicians, doctors, nurses and philosophers during the Golden Age of Islam. Technology flourished. There was investment in economic infrastructure, such as irrigation systems and canals. And the importance of reading the Quran produced a comparatively high level of literacy in the general populace. In the later Middle Ages, destructive Mongol invasions from the east, and the loss of population in the Black Death, greatly weakened the traditional center of the Islamic world, stretching from Persia to Egypt, and the Ottoman Empire was able to conquer most Arabic-speaking areas, creating an Islamic world power again, although one that was unable to master the challenges of the early modern period. Later, in modern history, 18th and 19th centuries, many Islamic regions fell under the influence of European great powers. After the First World War, Ottoman territories, a Central Powers member, were partitioned into several nations under the terms of the Treaty of Sèvres. Although affected by ideologies such as socialism and secularism during much of the 20th century, the Islamic identity and the dominance of Islam on political issues intensified during the early 21st century. Global interests in Islamic regions, international conflicts and globalization changed the type of Islamic influence on the contemporary world. In the contemporary period, a set of ideologies holding interpretations of Islamic texts that advocate the unification of religion and state has spread, but the ideology has been criticized.
Major periods.
The Islamic State and Muslim system of government evolved through various stages. The precise dates of various periods in history are more or less arbitrary. The city-state period lasted from 620s to 630s. The imperial period lasted from 630s to 750s. The universal period lasted from 750s to around 900s. These correspond to the early period of post-classical history. The decentralization period lasted from around 900s to the early 1500s. This corresponds to the high period and late period of post-classical history. The fragmentation period lasted from around 1500s to the late 1910s. The contemporary period, referred to as the national period, lasted from 1910s into the 21st century.
Islamic origins.
In pre-Islamic Arabia, Arab people lived on the Arabian Plate. In the south of Hijaz, principal religious and commercial center of post-classical Arabia, the Arabic tribe of Quraysh, Adnani Arabs, to which Muhammad belonged, had been in existence. Near Mecca, the tribe was increasing in power. The Quraysh were the guardians of the Kaaba within the town of Mecca and was the dominant tribe of Mecca upon the appearance of Islam. The Kaaba, at the time, was used as an important pagan shrine. It brought revenues to Mecca because of the multitude of pilgrims that it attracted. Muhammad was born into the Banu Hashim tribe of the Quraysh clan, a branch of the Banu Kinana tribe, descended from Khuzaymah and derived its inheritance from the Khuzaymah, House of Khuzayah. According to the traditional Islamic view, the Quran, began with revelations to Muhammad, when he was 40 years old, in 610. The history of the Quran began when its verses were revealed to the Sayyaba during Muhammad's life. The rise of Islam began around the time Muslims took flight in the Hira, moving to Medina. With Islam, blood feuds among the Arabs lessened. Compensation was paid in money rather than blood, and only the culprit was executed. In 628, the Mecca tribe of Quraysh and the Muslim community in Medina signed a truce called the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, beginning a 10-year period of peace. War returned when the Quraysh and their allies, the tribe of Bakr, attacked the tribe of Khuzayah, who were Muslim allies. In 630, Muslims conquered Mecca. Muhammad died in June 632. The Battle of Yamamah was fought in December of the same year, between the forces of the first Caliph Abu Bakr and Musaylima.
City-states and imperial period.
After Muhammad died, a series of caliphs governed the Islamic State: Abu Bakr, 632–634, Umar ibn al-Khattab, Umar I, 634–644, Uthman ibn Affan, 644–656, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, 656–661. These leaders are known as the Rashidun, or rightly guided caliphs in Sunni Islam. They oversaw the initial phase of the Muslim conquests, advancing through Persia, Egypt, the Middle East and North Africa. Umar improved the administration and built cities like Basra and canal and irrigation networks. To be close to the poor, Umar lived in a simple mud hut without doors and walked the streets every evening. After consulting with the poor, Umar established the first welfare state, Bayt el-Mal. The Bayt el-Mal, or the welfare state, was for the Muslim and non-Muslim poor, needy, elderly, orphans, widows, and the disabled. The Bayt el-Mal ran for hundreds of years under the Rashidun Caliphate in the 7th century and continued through the Umayyad period and well into the Abbasid era. Umar also introduced child benefit for the children and pensions for the elderly. The expansion of the state was partially terminated between 638 to 639 during the years of Great Famine and Plague in Arabia and Levant respectively. During Umar's reign, within 10 years Levant, Egypt, Cyrenaica, Tripolitania, Fezzan, Eastern Anatolia, almost the whole of Sassanid Persian Empire including Bactria, Persia, Azerbaijan, Armenia, Caucasus and Makran were incorporated into Islamic State. When Umar was assassinated in 644, the election of Uthman as successor was met with increasing opposition. The Quran was standardized during this time. Local populations of Jews and indigenous Christians, persecuted as religious minorities and taxed heavily to finance the Byzantine Sassanid wars, often aided Muslims to take over their lands from the Byzantines and Persians, resulting in exceptionally speedy conquests. As new areas joining the Islamic State, they also benefited from free trade, while trading with other areas in the Islamic State, so as to encourage commerce. In Islam, trade is not taxed, wealth is taxed. The Muslims paid zakat on their wealth to the poor. Since the Constitution of Medina was drafted by the Islamic prophet Muhammad, the Jews and the Christians continued to use their own laws in the Islamic State and had their own judges. Therefore they only paid for policing for the protection of their property. To assist in the quick expansion of the state, the Byzantine and the Persian tax collection systems were maintained and the people paid a poll tax lower than the one imposed under the Byzantines and the Persians. In 639, Muawiyah I was appointed as the governor of Syria after the previous governor Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah died in a plague along with 25,000 other people. To stop the Byzantine harassment from the sea during the Arab-Byzantine Wars, in 649 Muawiyah I set up a navy manned by monophysitized Christians, Copts and Jacobite Syrian Christian sailors and Muslim troops. This resulted in the defeat of the Byzantine navy at the Battle of the Masts in 655, opening up the Mediterranean. When Umar was assassinated in 644, Uthman ibn Affan became the next caliph. As it is well known that Arabic language is written without vowels, and when Quran reached to non-Arabic speakers, people began having different dialects and phonics, which was changing the exact meaning of verses in the Quran. This was brought to the notice of Uthman ibn Affan. Begun in the time of Uthman ibn Affan, The compilation of the Quran was finished sometime between 650 and 656. Uthman sent copies to the different centers of the expanding Islamic empire. From then on, thousands of Muslim scribes began copying the Quran. The Quran and Muhammad talked about racial equality and justices in the farewell sermon. Tribal and nationalistic differences were discouraged. But after Muhammad's passing, the old tribal differences between the Arabs started to resurface. Following the Roman-Persian Wars and the Byzantine-Sassanid Wars, deep-rooted differences between Iraq, formerly under the Persian Sassanid Empire, and Syria, formerly under the Byzantine Empire, also existed. Each wanted the capital of the newly established Islamic State to be in their area. Previously, the second caliph, Umar, was very firm on the governors, and his spies kept an eye on the governors. If he felt that a governor or a commander was becoming attracted to wealth or did not meet the required administrative standards, he had him removed from his position. Early Muslim armies stayed in encampments away from cities because Umar feared that they may get attracted to wealth and luxury. In the process, they may get away from the worship of God and become attracted to wealth and start accumulating wealth and establishing dynasties. Wealth and children are adornment of the worldly life. But the enduring good deeds are better to your Lord for reward and better for hope. Quran 18:46. O you who have believed, let not your wealth and your children divert you from remembrance of Allah. And whoever does that, then those are the losers. Quran 63:9. Staying in these encampments away from the cities also ensured that there was no stress on the population, and also that the populations remained autonomous and kept their own judges and representatives. Some of these encampments later grew into cities themselves, like Basra and Kufa in Iraq and Fustat in Egypt. Some cities also had agreements with the Muslims, such as during the siege of Jerusalem in 637 CE. As Uthman ibn Affan became very old, Marwan I, a relative of Muawiyah I, slipped into the vacuum and became his secretary and slowly assumed more control and relaxed some of these restrictions. Marwan I had previously been excluded from positions of responsibility. In 656, Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, the son of Abu Bakr and the adopted son of Ali ibn Abi Talib and the great-grandfather of Ja'far al-Sadiq, showed some Egyptians, the house of Uthman ibn Affan. Later the Egyptians ended up killing Uthman ibn al-Affan. Ali then assumed the position of caliph and moved the capital to Kufa in Iraq. Muawiyah I, the governor of Syria, a relative of Uthman ibn al-Affan, and Marwan I wanted the culprits arrested. Marwan I manipulated everyone and created conflict. This later resulted in the First Civil War, the first fitna. Ali was assassinated by Kharijites in 661. 6 months later in 661, in the interest of peace, Hussein ibn Ali, highly regarded for his wisdom and as a peacemaker, the fifth rightly guided caliphs for the Sunnis and the second imam for the Shias and the grandson of Muhammad, made a peace treaty with Muawiyah I in the Hussein-Muawiyah Treaty. Hussein ibn Ali handed over power to Muawiyah on the condition that he be just to the people and keep them safe and secure, and after his death he does not establish a dynasty. This brought to an end the era of the rightly guided caliphs for the Sunnis, and Hussein ibn Ali was also the last imam for the Shias to be a caliph. Following this, Muawiyah broke the conditions of the agreement and began the Umayyad dynasty, with its capital in Damascus. After Muawiyah's death in 680, conflict over succession broke out again in a civil war known as the Second Fitna. After making everyone else fight, the Umayyad dynasty later fell into the hands of Marwan I, who was also an Umayyad. The Umayyads conquered the Maghrib, the Iberian Peninsula, Narbonese Gaul and Sind. After the peace treaty with Ali's son, Hussein ibn Ali, and the suppression of the revolt of the Kharijites, Muawiyah I proclaimed himself caliph in 661 and began consolidating power. In 663, a new Karaite revolt resulted in the death of their chief. In 664, Muawiyah and Ziyad ibn Abi Sufyan reached an agreement. The caliph recognized Ziyad as a brother and appointed him governor at Basra. Ziyad took the name Ibn Abi Sufyan. Muawiyah arranged for his son Yazid I to be appointed caliph on his death, which came in 680. Hussein ibn Ali, by then Muhammad's only living grandson, refused to swear allegiance to Yazid. He was killed in the Battle of Karbala the same year, an event still mourned by Muslims on the day of Ashura. Unrest continued in the second fitna, but Muslim rule was extended under Muawiyah to Rhodes, Crete, Kabul, Bukhara, and Samarkand, and expanded in North Africa. In 664, Arab armies conquered Kabul, and in 665 pushed into the Maghreb. The Umayyad dynasty, or Umayyads, whose name derives from Umayya ibn Abi Shams, the great-grandfather of the first Umayyad caliph, ruled from 661 to 750. Although the Umayyad family came from the city of Mecca, Damascus was the capital. After the death of Abdul-Rahman ibn Abu Bakr in 666, Muawiyah I consolidated his power. Muawiyah I moved his capital to Damascus from Medina, which led to profound changes in the empire. In the same way, at a later date, the transfer of the caliphate from Damascus to Baghdad marked the accession of a new family to power. As the state grew, the state expenses increased. Additionally, the Bait al-Mal and the welfare state expenses to assist the Muslim and the non-Muslim poor, needy, elderly, orphans, widows, and the disabled, increased. The Umayyads asked the new converts, Mawali, to continue paying the poll tax. The Umayyad rule, with its wealth and luxury, also seemed at odds with the Islamic message preached by Muhammad. All this increased discontent. The descendants of Muhammad's uncle Abbas ibn Abd al-Muttalib rallied discontented Mawali, poor Arabs, and some Shah against the Umayyads and overthrew them with the help of the general Abu Muslim, inaugurating the Abbasid dynasty in 750, which moved the capital to Baghdad. A branch of the Umayyad family fled across North Africa to Al-Andalus, where they established the Caliphate of Cordoba, which lasted until 1031 before falling due to the fitna of Al-Andalus. The Bait al-Mal, the welfare state, then continued under the Abbasids. At its largest extent, the Umayyad dynasty covered more than 5 million square miles, 13 million kilometers too, making it one of the largest empires the world had yet seen, and the fifth largest contiguous empire ever. After the Umayyads were overthrown by the Abbasid Caliphate, they fled across North Africa to Al-Andalus, where they established the Caliphate of Cordoba, which lasted until 1031 with the fitna of Al-Andalus. Muawiyah beautified Damascus, and developed a court to rival that of Constantinople. He expanded the frontiers of the empire, reaching the edge of Constantinople at one point, though the Byzantines drove him back and he was unable to hold any territory in Anatolia. Sunni Muslims credit him with saving the fledgling Muslim nation from post-Civil War anarchy. However, Shia Muslims accuse him of instigating the war, weakening the Muslim nation by dividing the Ummah, fabricating self-aggrandizing heresies, slandering the Prophet's family, and even selling his Muslim critics into slavery in the Byzantine Empire. One of Muawiyah's most controversial and enduring legacies was his decision to designate his son Yazid as his successor. According to Shiite doctrine, this was a clear violation of the treaty he made with Hassan ibn Ali. In 682 AD, Yazid restored Akbar ibn Afi as the governor of North Africa. Akbar won battles against the Berbers and Byzantines. From there, Akbar marched thousands of miles westward towards Tangier, where he reached the Atlantic coast, and then marched eastwards through the Atlas Mountains. With about 300 cavalrymen, he proceeded towards Biskra, where he was ambushed by a Berber force under Kesla. Akbar and all his men died fighting. The Berbers attacked and drove Muslims from North Africa for a period. Weakened by the civil wars, the Umayyad lost supremacy at sea, and had to abandon the islands of Rhodes and Crete. Under the rule of Yazid I, some Muslims in Kufa began to think that if Husayn ibn Ali, the descendant of Muhammad, was their ruler, he would have been more just. He was invited to Kufa but was later betrayed and killed. Later this concept was taken one step further and they started thinking, what if history took a different course and Ali was the first caliph? And these ideas were later adopted by some Shia and institutionalized by the Safavids. The period under Muawiyah II was marked by civil wars, second fitna. This would ease in the reign of Abd al-Malik ibn Marwan, a well-educated and capable ruler. Despite the many political problems that impeded his rule, All important records were translated into Arabic. In his reign, a currency for the Muslim world was minted. This led to war with the Byzantine Empire under Justinian II, Battle of Sebastopol, in 692 in Asia Minor. The Byzantines were decisively defeated by the Caliph after the defection of a large contingent of Slavs. The Islamic currency was then made the exclusive currency in the Muslim world. He reformed agriculture and commerce. Abd al-Malik consolidated Muslim rule and extended it, made Arabic the state language, and organized a regular postal service. Al-Walid I began the next stage of Islamic conquests. Under him the early Islamic empire reached its furthest extent. He reconquered parts of Egypt from the Byzantine Empire and moved on into Carthage and across to the west of North Africa. Muslim armies under Tariq ibn Ziyad crossed the Strait of Gibraltar and began to conquer Spain using North African Berber armies. The Visigoths of Spain were defeated when the Umayyad conquered Lisbon. Spain was the farthest extent of Islamic control of Europe. They were stopped at the Battle of Tours. In the east, Islamic armies under Muhammad bin Qasim made it as far as the Indus Valley. Under al-Walid, the Caliphate Empire stretched from Spain to India. Al-Hajjaj ibn Yusuf played a crucial role in the organization and selection of military commanders. Al-Walid paid great attention to the expansion of an organized military, building the strongest navy in the Umayyad era. This tactic was crucial for the expansion to Spain. His reign is considered to be the apex of Islamic power. Sulayman ibn Abd al-Malik was hailed as caliph the day al-Walid died. He appointed Yazid ibn al-Muhallab governor of Mesopotamia. Sulayman ordered the arrest and execution of the family of al-Hajjaj, one of two prominent leaders. The other was Qutayba ibn Muslim, who had supported the succession of al-Walid's son Yazid, rather than Sulayman. Al-Hajjaj had predeceased al-Walid, so he posed no threat. Qutayba renounced allegiance to Sulayman, though his troops rejected his appeal to revolt. They killed him and sent his head to Sulayman. Sulayman did not move to Damascus on becoming caliph, remaining in Ramla. Sulayman sent Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik to attack the Byzantine capital, siege of Constantinople. The intervention of Bulgaria on the Byzantine side proved decisive. The Muslims sustained heavy losses. Sulayman died suddenly in 717. Yazid II came to power on the death of Umar II. Yazid fought the Kharijites, with whom Umar had been negotiating, and killed the Karaite leader Shordub. In Yazid's reign, civil wars began in different parts of the empire. Yazid expanded the caliphate's territory into the Caucasus, before dying in 724. Inheriting the caliphate from his brother, Hisham ibn Abd al-Malik ruled an empire with many problems. He was effective in addressing these problems, and in allowing the Umayyad Empire to continue as an entity. His long rule was an effective one, and renewed reforms introduced by Umar II. Under Hisham's rule, regular raids against the Byzantines continued. In North Africa, Karaite teachings combined with local restlessness to produce the Berber revolt. He was also faced with a revolt by Zayd ibn Ali. Hisham suppressed both revolts. The Abbasids continued to gain power in Khorasan and Iraq. However, they were not strong enough to make a move yet. Some were caught and punished or executed by eastern governors. The Battle of Akroinon, a decisive Byzantine victory, was during the final campaign of the Umayyad dynasty. Hisham died in 743. Al-Walid II saw political intrigue during his reign. Yazid III spoke out against his cousin Walid's immorality, which included discrimination on behalf of the Banu Qais Arabs against Yemenis and non-Arab Muslims, and Yazid received further support from the Qadariya and Nurayriya, believers in human free will. Walid was shortly thereafter deposed in a coup. Yazid disbursed funds from the treasury and acceded to the caliph. He explained that he had rebelled on behalf of the Book of Allah and the Sunnah. Yazid reigned for only 6 months, while various groups refused allegiance and dissident movements arose, after which he died. Ibrahim ibn al-Walid, named heir apparent by his brother Yazid III, ruled for a short time in 744, before he abdicated. Marwan II ruled from 744 until he was killed in 750. He was the last Umayyad ruler to rule from Damascus. Marwan named his two sons Ubaydullah and Abdulaziz. He appointed governors and asserted his authority by force. Anti-Umayyad feeling was very prevalent, especially in Iran and Iraq. The Abbasids had gained much support. Marwan's reign as caliph was almost entirely devoted to trying to keep the Umayyad Empire together. His death signaled the end of Umayyad rule in the east, and was followed by the massacre of Umayyads by the Abbasids. Almost the entire Umayyad dynasty was killed, except for the talented Prince Abd al-Rahman who escaped to Spain and founded a dynasty there.
Universal period and decentralization. Islamic Golden Age.
The Abbasid dynasty rose to power in 750, consolidating the gains of the earlier caliphates. Initially, they conquered Mediterranean islands including the Balearics and Sicily. The ruling party had come to power on the wave of dissatisfaction with the Umayyads, cultivated by the Abbasid revolutionary Abu Muslim. Under the Abbasids, Islamic civilization flourished. Most notable was the development of Arabic prose and poetry, termed by the Cambridge History of Islam as its Golden Age. Commerce and industry, considered a Muslim agricultural revolution, and the arts and sciences, considered a Muslim scientific revolution, also prospered under Abbasid caliphs. Al-Mansur, ruled 754, 775, Harun al-Rashid, ruled 786, 809, Al-Ma'mun, ruled 809, 813, and their immediate successors. The capital was moved from Damascus to Baghdad, due to the importance placed by the Abbasids upon eastern affairs in Persia and Transoxania. At this time the caliphate showed signs of fracture amid the rise of regional dynasties. Although the Umayyad family had been killed by the revolting Abbasids, one family member, Abd ar-Rahman I, escaped to Spain and established an independent caliphate there in 756. In the Maghreb, Harun al-Rashid appointed the Arab Alabids as virtually autonomous rulers, although they continued to recognize central authority. Alabid rule was short-lived, and they were deposed by the Shiite Fatimid dynasty in 909. By around 960, the Fatimids had conquered Abbasid Egypt, building a capital there in 973 called Al-Qahira, meaning the planet of victory, known today as Cairo. In Persia the Turkic Ghaznavids snatched power from the Abbasids. Abbasid influence had been consumed by the Great Seljuk Empire, a Muslim Turkish clan which had migrated into mainland Persia, by 1055. Expansion continued, sometimes by force, sometimes by peaceful proselytizing. The first stage in the conquest of India began just before the year 1000. By some 200, from 1193, 1209, years later, the area up to the Ganges River had fallen. In sub-Saharan West Africa, Islam was established just after the year 1000. Muslim rulers were in Kanem starting from sometime between 1081 to 1097, with reports of a Muslim prince at the head of Gao as early as 1009. The Islamic kingdoms associated with Mali reached prominence in the 13th century. The Abbasids developed initiatives aimed at greater Islamic unity. Different sects of the Islamic faith and mosques, separated by doctrine, history, and practice, were pushed to cooperate. The Abbasids also distinguished themselves from the Umayyads by attacking the Umayyads' moral character and administration. According to Ira Lapidus, the Abbasid revolt was supported largely by Arabs, mainly the aggrieved settlers of Marw with the addition of the Yemeni faction and the Mawali. The Abbasids also appealed to non-Arab Muslims, known as Mawali, who remained outside the kinship-based society of the Arabs and were perceived as a lower class within the Umayyad Empire. Islamic ecumenism, promoted by the Abbasids, refers to the idea of unity of the Ummah in the literal meaning, that there was a single faith. Islamic philosophy developed as the Sharia was codified, and the four madhabs were established. This era also saw the rise of classical Sufism. Religious achievements included completion of the canonical collections of Hadith of Sahih Bukhari and others. Islam recognized to a certain extent the validity of the Abrahamic religions, the Quran identifying Jews, Christians, Zoroastrians, and Zabayan, or Baptists, usually taken as a reference to the Mandaeans and related Mesopotamian groups, as people of the book. Toward the beginning of the High Middle Ages, the doctrines of the Sunni and Shia, two major denominations of Islam, solidified and the divisions of the world theologically would form. These trends would continue into the Fatimid and Almohad periods. Politically, the Abbasid Caliphate evolved into an Islamic monarchy, unitary system of government. The regional sultanate and emirate governors' existence, validity, or legality were acknowledged for unity of the state. In the early Islamic philosophy of the Iberian Umayyads, Averroes presented an argument in the decisive treatise, providing a justification for the emancipation of science and philosophy from official Ash'ari theology. Thus, Averroism has been considered a precursor to modern secularism.
Golden Baghdad Abbasids.
Early Middle Ages. According to Arab sources, in the year 750, al-Safar, the founder of the Abbasid Caliphate, launched a massive rebellion against the Umayyad Caliphate from the province of Khorasan near Talas. After eliminating the entire Umayyad family and achieving victory at the Battle of the Zab, al-Safar and his forces marched into Damascus and founded a new dynasty. His forces confronted many regional powers and consolidated the realm of the Abbasid Caliphate. In al-Mansur's time, Persian scholarship emerged. Many non-Arabs converted to Islam. The Umayyads actively discouraged conversion in order to continue the collection of the jizya, or the tax on non-Muslims. Islam nearly doubled within its territory from 8% of residents in 750 to 15% by the end of al-Mansur's reign. Al-Mahdi, whose name means rightly guided, or redeemer, was proclaimed caliph when his father was on his deathbed. Baghdad blossomed during al-Mahdi's reign, becoming the world's largest city. It attracted immigrants from Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Persia and as far away as India and Spain. Baghdad was home to Christians, Jews, Hindus, and Zoroastrians, in addition to the growing Muslim population. Like his father, al-Hadi was open to his people and allowed citizens to address him in the palace at Baghdad. He was considered an enlightened ruler, and continued the policies of his Abbasid predecessors. His short rule was plagued by military conflicts and internal intrigue. The military conflicts subsided as Harun al-Rashid ruled. His reign was marked by scientific, cultural and religious prosperity. He established the library Beit el-Hikmah, House of Wisdom, and the arts and music flourished during his reign. The Barmakid family played a decisive adversarial role in establishing the caliphate, but declined during Rashid's rule. According to signed pledges during a pilgrimage to Mecca, al-Amin received the caliphate from his father Harun al-Rashid. Al-Amin faced internal rebellions. General Tahir ibn Husayn rebelled and besieged Baghdad. Tahir led reinforcements to regain positions lost by another officer. When Tahir pushed into the city, al-Amin sought to negotiate safe passage. Tahir agreed on the condition al-Amin turn over his scepter, seal and other signs that he was caliph. Al-Amin tried to leave on a boat and rejected warnings that he wait. Tahir's forces attacked the boat and al-Amin was thrown into the water. He swam to shore where he was captured and executed. His head was placed on the Al-Akbar gate.
Regional powers.
The Abbasids soon became caught in a three-way rivalry among Coptic Arabs, Indo-Persians, and immigrant Turks. In addition, the cost of running a large empire became too great. The Turks, Egyptians, and Arabs adhered to the Sunnite sect. The Persians, a great portion of the Turkic groups, and several of the princes in India were Shia. The political unity of Islam began to disintegrate. Under the influence of the Abbasid caliphs, independent dynasties appeared in the Muslim world and the caliphs recognized such dynasties as legitimately Muslim. The first was the Ta'irid dynasty in Khorasan, which was founded during the Caliph al-Ma'mun's reign. Similar dynasties included the Saffarids, Samanids, Ghaznavids and Seljuks. During this time, advancements were made in the areas of astronomy, poetry, philosophy, science, and mathematics.
High Baghdad Abbasids.
Early Middle Ages. Upon al-Amin's death, al-Ma'mun became caliph. Al-Ma'mun extended the Abbasid Empire's territory during his reign and dealt with rebellions. Al-Ma'mun had been named governor of Khorasan by Harun, and after his ascension to power, the caliph named Tahir as governor of his military services in order to assure his loyalty. Tahir and his family became entrenched in Iranian politics and became powerful, frustrating al-Ma'mun's desire to centralize and strengthen caliphal power. The rising power of the Taghirid dynasty became a threat as al-Ma'mun's own policies alienated them and other opponents. Al-Ma'mun worked to centralize power and ensure a smooth succession. Al-Mahdi proclaimed that the caliph was the protector of Islam against heresy, and also claimed the ability to declare orthodoxy. Religious scholars averred that al-Ma'mun was overstepping his bounds in the Minna, the Abbasid Inquisition which he introduced in 833, 4 months before he died. The ulama emerged as a force in Islamic politics during al-Ma'mun's reign for opposing the Inquisitions. The ulama and the major Islamic law schools took shape in the period of al-Ma'mun. In parallel, Sunnism became defined as a religion of laws. Doctrinal differences between Sunni and Shia Islam became more pronounced. During the al-Ma'mun regime, border wars increased. Al-Ma'mun made preparations for a major campaign, but died while leading an expedition in Sardis. Al-Ma'mun gathered scholars of many religions at Baghdad, whom he treated well and with tolerance. He sent an emissary to the Byzantine Empire to collect the most famous manuscripts there, and had them translated into Arabic. His scientists originated alchemy. Shortly before his death, during a visit to Egypt in 832, the caliph ordered the breaching of the Great Pyramid of Giza to search for knowledge and treasure. Workers tunneled in near where tradition located the original entrance. Al-Ma'mun later died near Tarsus under questionable circumstances and was succeeded by his half-brother, al-Mu'tasim, rather than his son, al-Abbas ibn al-Ma'mun. As caliph, al-Mu'tasim promptly ordered the dismantling of al-Ma'mun's military base at Chiana. He faced Karamite revolts. One of the most difficult problems facing this caliph was the ongoing uprising of Babak Karamdin. Al-Mu'tasim overcame the rebels and secured a significant victory. Byzantine Emperor Theophilus launched an attack against Abbasid fortresses. Al-Mu'tasim sent al-Afshan, who met and defeated Theophilus' forces at the Battle of Anzan. On his return he became aware of a serious military conspiracy which forced him and his successors to rely upon Turkish commanders and Ghilman slave soldiers, foreshadowing the Mamluk system. The Karamu were never fully suppressed, although they slowly declined during the reigns of succeeding caliphs. Near the end of al-Mu'tasim's life there was an uprising in Palestine, but he defeated the rebels. During al-Mu'tasim's reign, the Taghirid dynasty continued to grow in power. The Taghirids were exempted from many tribute and oversight functions. Their independence contributed to Abbasid decline in the east. Ideologically, al-Mu'tasim followed his half-brother al-Ma'mun. He continued his predecessor's support for the Islamic Mu'tazila sect, applying brutal torture against the opposition. Arab mathematician al-Kindi was employed by al-Mu'tasim and tutored the caliph's son. Al-Kindi had served at the House of Wisdom and continued his studies in Greek geometry and algebra under the caliph's patronage. Al-Wathiq succeeded his father. Al-Wathiq dealt with opposition in Arabia, Syria, Palestine and in Baghdad. Using a famous swords he personally joined the execution of the Baghdad rebels. The revolts were the result of an increasingly large gap between Arab populations and the Turkish armies. The revolts were put down, but antagonism between the two groups grew, as Turkish forces gained power. He also secured a captive exchange with the Byzantines. Al-Wathiq was a patron of scholars, as well as artists. He personally had musical talent and is reputed to have composed over 100 songs. When Al-Wathiq died of high fever, Al-Mutawakkil succeeded him. Al-Mutawakkil's reign is remembered for many reforms and is viewed as a golden age. He was the last great Abbasid caliph. After his death the dynasty fell into decline. Al-Mutawakkil ended the Mina. Al-Mutawakkil built the Great Mosque of Samarra as part of an extension of Samarra eastwards. During his reign, Al-Mutawakkil met famous Byzantine theologian Constantine the philosopher, who was sent to strengthen diplomatic relations between the empire and the caliphate by Emperor Michael III. Al-Mutawakkil involved himself in religious debates, as reflected in his actions against minorities. The Shia faced repression embodied in the destruction of the shrine of Husayn ibn Ali, an action that was ostensibly carried out to stop pilgrimages. Al-Mutawakkil continued to rely on Turkish statesmen and slave soldiers to put down rebellions and led battles against foreign empires, notably capturing Sicily from the Byzantines. Al-Mutawakkil was assassinated by a Turkish soldier. Al-Muntazir succeeded to the caliphate on the same day with the support of the Turkish faction, though he was implicated in the murder. The Turkish party had Al-Muntazir remove his brothers from the line of succession, fearing revenge for the murder of their father. Both brothers wrote statements of abdication. During his reign, Al-Muntazir removed the ban on pilgrimage to the tombs of Hassan and Hussein and sent Wasif to raid the Byzantines. Al-Muntazir died of unknown causes. The Turkish chiefs held a council to select his successor, electing al-Musta'in. The Arabs and Western troops from Baghdad were displeased at the choice and attacked. However, the caliphate no longer depended on Arabian choice, but depended on Turkish support. After the failed Muslim campaign against the Christians, people blamed the Turks for bringing disaster on the faith and murdering their caliphs. After the Turks besieged Baghdad, al-Musta'in planned to abdicate to al-Mu'taz but was put to death by his order. Al-Mu'taz was enthroned by the Turks, becoming the youngest Abbasid caliph to assume power. Al-Mu'taz proved a pupil of his Turkish masters, but was surrounded by parties jealous of each other. At Samarra, the Turks were having problems with the Westerns, Berbers and Moors, while the Arabs and Persians at Baghdad, who had supported al-Musta'in, regarded both with equal hatred. Al-Mu'taz put his brothers al-Mu'ayyad and Abu Ahmed to death. The ruler spent recklessly, causing a revolt of Turks, Africans, and Persians for their pay. Al-Mu'taz was brutally deposed shortly thereafter. Al-Mu'tadi became the next caliph. He was firm and virtuous compared to the earlier caliphs, though the Turks held a power. The Turks killed him soon after his ascension. Al-Mu'tamid followed, holding on for 23 years, though he was largely a ruler in name only. After the Zanj rebellion, Al-Mu'tamid summoned al-Muwaffaq to help him. Thereafter, al-Muwaffaq ruled in all but name. The Hamdanid dynasty was founded by Hamdan ibn Hamdan when he was appointed governor of Mardin in Anatolia by the caliphs in 890. Al-Mu'tamid later transferred authority to his son, al-Mu'tadid, and never regained power. The Tulunids became the first independent state in Islamic Egypt, when they broke away during this time. Al-Mu'tadid ably administered the caliphate. Egypt returned to allegiance and Mesopotamia was restored to order. He was tolerant towards Shi, but toward the Umayyad community he was not so just. Al-Mu'tadid was cruel in his punishments, some of which are not surpassed by those of his predecessors. For example, the Karaite leader at Mosul was paraded about Baghdad clothed in a robe of silk, of which Kharijites denounced as sinful, and then crucified. Upon al-Mu'tadid's death, his son by a Turkish slave girl, al-Muqtafi, succeeded to the throne. Al-Muqtafi became a favorite of the people for his generosity, and for abolishing his father's secret prisons, the terror of Baghdad. During his reign, the caliphate overcame threats such as the Commathians. Upon al-Muqtafi's death, the Vizier next chose al-Muqtadir. Al-Muqtadir's reign was a constant succession of 13 Viziers, one rising on the fall or assassination of another. His long reign brought the empire to its lowest ebb. Africa was lost, and Egypt nearly. Mosul threw off its dependence, and the Greeks raided across the undefended border. The East continued to formally recognize the caliphate, including those who virtually claimed independence. At the end of the early Baghdad Abbasids period, Empress Oe-Qabanopsina pressed for an armistice with al-Muqtadir and arranged for the ransom of the Muslim prisoner while the Byzantine frontier was threatened by Bulgarians. This only added to Baghdad's disorder. Though despised by the people, al-Muqtadir was again placed in power after upheavals. Al-Muqtadir was eventually slain outside the city gates, whereupon Courteous chose his brother al-Qayyar. He was even worse. Refusing to abdicate, he was blinded and cast into prison. His son Arodi took over only to experience a cascade of misfortune. Praised for his piety, he became the tool of the de facto ruling minister, Ibn Rake, Amir al-Amara. Amir of the Emirs. Ibn Rake held the reins of government and his name was joined with the caliphs in public prayers. Around this period, the Hanbalis, supported by popular sentiment, set up in fact a kind of Sunni Inquisition. Al-Rodi is commonly regarded as the last of the real caliphs, the last to deliver orations at the Friday service, to hold assemblies, to commune with philosophers, to discuss the questions of the day, to take counsel on the affairs of state, to distribute arms, or to temper the severity of cruel officers. Thus ended the early Baghdad Abbasids. In the late mid-930s, the Iqshidids of Egypt carried the Arabic title Wali, reflecting their position as governors on behalf of the Abbasids. The first governor, Muhammad bin Tujhj al-Iqshid, was installed by the Abbasid Caliph. They gave him and his descendants the Wilayah for 30 years. The last name Iqshid is Sogdian for prince. Also in the 930s, Ali ibn Buyar and his two younger brothers, Al-Hassan and Ahmad, founded the Buyid Confederation. Originally a soldier in the service of the Ziyarids of Tabaristan, Ali was able to recruit an army to defeat a Turkish general from Baghdad named Yacht in 934. Over the next 9 years the three brothers gained control of the remainder of the caliphate, while accepting the titular authority of the caliph in Baghdad. The Buyids made large territorial gains. Fars and Jibal were conquered. Central Iraq submitted in 945, before the Buyids took Kerman, 967, Oman, 967, the Jazeera, 979, Tabaristan, 980, and Gorgan, 981. After this the Buyids went into slow decline, with pieces of the confederation gradually breaking off and local dynasties under their rule becoming de facto independent.
Middle Baghdad Abbasids.
Early High Middle Ages. At the beginning of the Middle Baghdad Abbasids, the caliphate had become of little importance. The Emir al-Amara Barkam contented himself with dispatching his secretary to Baghdad to assemble local dignitaries to elect a successor. The choice fell on al-Mutaqi. Barkam was killed on a hunting party by marauding Kurds. In the ensuing anarchy in Baghdad, Ibn Rake persuaded the caliph to flee to Mosul, where he was welcomed by the Hamdanids. They assassinated Ibn Rake. Hamdanid Nasir al-Dawla advanced on Baghdad, where mercenaries and well-organized Turks repelled them. Turkish General Tuzan became Emir al-Amara. The Turks were staunch Sunnis. A fresh conspiracy placed the caliph in danger. Hamdanid troops helped ad-Dawla escape to Mosul and then to Nazibin. Tuzan and the Hamdanid were stalemated. Al-Mutaqi was at Raqqa, moving to Tuzan where he was deposed. Tuzan installed the blinded caliph's cousin as successor, with the title of al-Mustaqfi. With the new caliph, Tuzan attacked the Buwayyid dynasty and the Hamdanids. Soon after, Tuzan died, and was succeeded by one of his generals, Abu Ja'far. The Buwayyids then attacked Baghdad, and Abu Ja'far fled into hiding with the caliph. Buwayyid Sultan Musa ad-Dawla assumed command, forcing the caliph into abject submission to the emir. Eventually, al-Mustaqfi was blinded and deposed. The city fell into chaos, and the caliph's palace was looted. Once the Buwayyids controlled Baghdad, al-Muti became caliph. The office was shorn of real power and Shah observances were established. The Buwayyids held on Baghdad for over a century. Throughout the Buwayyid reign the caliphate was at its lowest ebb, but was recognized religiously, except in Iberia. Buwaid Sultan Mu'izz al-Dawla was prevented from raising a Shia caliph to the throne by fear for his own safety, and fear of rebellion, in the capital and beyond. The next caliph, al-Tawi, reigned over factional strife in Syria among the Fatimids, Turks, and Commathians. The hideaway dynasty also fractured. The Abbasid borders were defended only by small border states. Baha al-Dawla, the Buyid Emir of Iraq, deposed al-Tawi in 991 and proclaimed al-Qadir the new caliph. During al-Qadir's caliphate, Mahmud of Azi looked after the empire. The great Mahmud of Azi, of Eastern fame, was friendly towards the caliphs, and his victories in the Indian Empire were accordingly announced from the pulpits of Baghdad in grateful and glowing terms. Al-Qadir fostered the Sunni struggle against Shi'ism and outlawed heresies such as the Baghdad Manifesto and the doctrine that the Quran was created. He outlawed the Mu'tazila, bringing an end to the development of rationalist Muslim philosophy. During this and the next period, Islamic literature, especially Persian literature, flourished under the patronage of the Buwayhids. By 1000 the global Muslim population had climbed to about 4% of the world total compared to the Christian population of 10%. During al-Qaim's reign, the Buwayyid ruler often fled the capital and the Seljuk dynasty gained power. Tughril overran Syria and Armenia. He then made his way into the capital, where he was well received both by chiefs and people. In Bahrain, the Kamishan state collapsed in al-Hassa. Arabia recovered from the Fatimids and again acknowledged the spiritual jurisdiction of the Abbasids. Al-Muqtadi was honored by the Seljuk Sultan Malik Shah, during whose reign the caliphate was recognized throughout the extending range of Seljuk conquest. The Sultan was critical of the caliph's interference in affairs of state, but died before deposing the last of the Middle Baghdad Abbasids.
Late Baghdad Abbasids.
Late High Middle Ages. The late Baghdad Abbasids reigned from the beginning of the Crusades to the Seventh Crusade. The first caliph was al-Mustazhar. He was politically irrelevant, despite civil strife at home and the First Crusade in Syria. Raymond IV of Toulouse attempted to attack Baghdad, losing at the Battle of Manzikert. The global Muslim population climbed to about 5% as against the Christian population of 11% by 1100. Jerusalem was captured by crusaders who massacred its inhabitants. Preachers traveled throughout the caliphate proclaiming the tragedy and rousing men to recover the Al-Aqsa Mosque from the Franks, European crusaders. Crowds of exiles rallied for war against the infidel. Neither the Sultan nor the Caliph sent an army west. Al-Mustashid achieved more independence while the Sultan Mahmud II of Great Seljuk was engaged in war in the east. The Banu Maziyadid state, General, Dubayz ibn Sadiq, Emir of al-Hilla, plundered Bosra and attacked Baghdad together with a young brother of the Sultan, Ghiyath ad-Din Masut. Dubayz was crushed by a Seljuk army under Zengi, founder of the Zengid dynasty. Mahmud's death was followed by a civil war between his son Dud, his nephew Masud and the Attribution II. Zengi was recalled to the east, stimulated by the Caliph and Dubayz, where he was beaten. The Caliph then laid siege to Mosul for 3 months without success, resisted by Masud and Zengi. It was nonetheless a milestone in the Caliphate's military revival. After the siege of Damascus, 1134, Zengi undertook operations in Syria. Al-Mustashid attacked Sultan Masut of Western Seljuk and was taken prisoner. He was later found murdered. His son, Al-Rashid failed to gain independence from Seljuk Turks. Zengi, because of the murder of Dubayz, set up a rival sultanate. Masut attacked. The Caliph and Zengi, hopeless of success, escaped to Mosul. The Sultan regained power, a council was held, the Caliph was deposed, and his uncle, son of al-Muqtafi, appointed as the new Caliph. Al-Rashid fled to Isfahan and was killed by Huzshashins. Continued disunion and contests between Seljuk Turks allowed al-Muqtafi to maintain control in Baghdad and to extend it throughout Iraq. In 1139, al-Muqtafi granted protection to the Nestorian Patriarch Abdissi III. While the crusade raged, the Caliph successfully defended Baghdad against Muhammad II of Seljuk in the Siege of Baghdad, 1157. The Sultan and the Caliph dispatched men in response to Zengi's appeal, but neither the Seljuks, nor the Caliph, nor their emirs, dared resist the Crusaders. The next Caliph, al-Mustanjid, saw Saladin extinguish the Fatimid dynasty after 260 years, and thus the Abbasids again prevailed. Al-Mustadi reigned when Saladin became the Sultan of Egypt and declared allegiance to the Abbasids. And Nasir, the victor for the religion of God, attempted to restore the caliphate to its ancient dominant role. He consistently held Iraq from Tikrit to the Gulf without interruption. His 47-year reign was chiefly marked by ambitious and corrupt dealings with the Tatar chiefs, and by his hazardous invocation of the Mongols, which ended his dynasty. His son, Ar-Ziyah, was caliph for a short period before his death, and an-Nasir's grandson, al-Mustansir, was made caliph. Al-Mustansir founded the Mustansiriya Madrasa. In 1236 Orjadi Khan commanded to raise up Khorasan and populated Herat. The Mongol military governors mostly made their camp in Mun Plain, Azerbaijan. The rulers of Mosul and Cilician Armenia surrendered. Chormukh divided the Transcaucasia region into 3 districts based on military hierarchy. In Georgia, the population were temporarily divided into 8 tumans. By 1237 the Mongol Empire had subjugated most of Persia, excluding Abbasid Iraq and Ismaili strongholds, and all of Afghanistan and Kashmir. Al-Musta'sim was the last Abbasid caliph in Baghdad and is noted for his opposition to the rise of Shajar al-Dur to the Egyptian throne during the Seventh Crusade. To the east, Mongol forces under Hulagu Khan swept through the Transoxiana and Khorasan. Baghdad was sacked and the caliph deposed soon afterwards. The Mamluk sultans and Syria later appointed a powerless Abbasid caliph in Cairo.
Cairo Abbasid Caliphs.
Abbasid Shadow Caliph of Cairo, Late Middle Ages. The Abbasid Shadow Caliph of Cairo reigned under the tutelage of the Mamluk sultans and nominal rulers used to legitimize the actual rule of the Mamluk sultans. All the Karen Abbasid caliphs who preceded or succeeded al-Musta'in were spiritual heads lacking any temporal power. Al-Musta'in was the only Cairo-based Abbasid caliph to even briefly hold political power. Al-Mutawakkil III was the last shadow caliph. In 1517, Ottoman Sultan Selim I defeated the Mamluk Sultanate, and made Egypt part of the Ottoman Empire.
Fatimid Empire.
The Fatimids originated in Ifriqiya, modern-day Tunisia and eastern Algeria. The dynasty was founded in 909 by Abdullah al-Mahdi Billah, who legitimized his claim through descent from Muhammad by way of his daughter Fatima az-Zahra and her husband Ali ibn Abi Talib, the first Shia Imam, hence the name al-Fatimiyyan Fatimid. The Fatimids and the Zaydis at the time, used the Hanafi jurisprudence, as did most Sunnis. Abdullah al-Mahdi's control soon extended over all of central Maghreb, an area consisting of the modern countries of Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia and Libya, which he ruled from Mahdia, his capital in Tunisia. The Fatimids entered Egypt in the late 10th century, conquering the Iqshidid dynasty and founding a capital at El-Qira, Cairo, in 969. The name was a reference to the planet Mars, the subduer, which was prominent in the sky at the moment that city construction started. Cairo was intended as a royal enclosure for the Fatimid caliph and his army, though the actual administrative and economic capital of Egypt was in cities such as Fustat until 1169. After Egypt, the Fatimids continued to conquer surrounding areas until they ruled from Tunisia to Syria and even crossed the Mediterranean into Sicily and southern Italy. Under the Fatimids, Egypt became the center of an empire that included at its peak North Africa, Sicily, Palestine, Lebanon, Syria, the Red Sea coast of Africa, Yemen and the Hejaz. Egypt flourished, and the Fatimids developed an extensive trade network in both the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. Their trade and diplomatic ties extended all the way to China and its Song dynasty, which determined the economic course of Egypt during the High Middle Ages. Unlike other governments in the area, Fatimid advancement in state offices was based more on merit than heredity. Members of other branches of Islam, including Sunnis, were just as likely to be appointed to government posts as Shiites. Tolerance covered non-Muslims such as Christians and Jews. They took high levels in government based on ability. There were, however, exceptions to this general attitude of tolerance, notably al-Hakim bi-Amr. The Fatimid palace was in two parts. It was in the Khan el-Khalili area at Bin el-Qasran's street.
Fatimid Caliphs.
Early and High Middle Ages. During the beginning of the Middle Baghdad Abbasids, the Fatimid caliphs claimed spiritual supremacy not only in Egypt, but also contested the religious leadership of Syria. At the beginning of the Abbasid realm in Baghdad, the Alids faced severe persecution by the ruling party as they were a direct threat to the caliphate. Owing to the Abbasid inquisitions, the forefathers opted for concealment of the Dawa's existence. Subsequently, they traveled towards the Iranian plateau and distanced themselves from the epicenter of the political world. Al-Mahdi's father, Al-Hussein al-Mastur, returned to control the Dawa's affairs. He sent 2 dais to Yemen and Western Africa. Al-Hussein died soon after the birth of his son, Al-Mahdi. A system of government helped update Al-Mahdi on the development which took place in North Africa. Al-Mahdi established the first imam of the Fatimid dynasty. He claimed genealogic origins dating as far back as Fatima through Husayn and Ismail. Al-Mahdi established his headquarters at Salamiyah and moved towards northwestern Africa, under Alawid rule. His success of laying claim to being the precursor to the Mahdi was instrumental among the Berber tribes of North Africa, specifically the Kitamar tribe. Al-Mahdi established himself at the former Alawid residence at Raqqa, a suburb of Al-Qahira in Tunisia. At the time of his death he had extended his reign to Morocco of the Idrisids, as well as Egypt itself. In 920, Al-Mahdi took up residence at the newly established capital of the empire, Al-Mahdiyah. After his death, Al-Mahdi was succeeded by his son, Abu al-Qasim Muhammad al-Qaim, who continued his expansionist policy.
Berbers and Iberian Umayyads.
The Arabs, under the command of the Berber general Tariq ibn Ziyad, first began their conquest of southern Spain or Al-Andalus in 711. A raiding party led by Tariq was sent to intervene in a civil war in the Visigothic kingdom in Hispania. Crossing the Strait of Gibraltar, named after the general, it won a decisive victory in the summer of 711 when the Visigothic king Roderick was defeated and killed on July 19 at the Battle of Guadalete. Tariq's commander, Musa bin Nasser, crossed with substantial reinforcements, and by 718 the Muslims dominated most of the peninsula. Some later Arabic and Christian sources present an earlier raid by a certain Tariq in 710, and also, the Ad Sebastianum recension of the Chronicle of Alfonso III, refers to an Arab attack incited by a Whig during the reign of Wamba, 672-80. The two large armies may have been in the south for a year before the decisive battle was fought. The rulers of Al-Andalus were granted the rank of emir by the Umayyad Caliph al-Walid I in Damascus. After the Abbasids came to power, some Umayyads fled to Muslim Spain to establish themselves there. By the end of the 10th century, the ruler Abd al-Rahman III took over the title of Emir of Córdoba, 912–961. Soon after, the Umayyads went on developing a strengthened state with its capital as Córdoba. Al-Hakam II succeeded to the caliphate after the death of his father Abd al-Rahman III in 961. He secured peace with the Christian kingdoms of northern Iberia, and made use of the stability to develop agriculture through the construction of irrigation works. Economic development was also encouraged through the widening of streets and the building of markets. The rule of the caliphate is known as the heyday of Muslim presence in the peninsula. The Umayyad Caliphate collapsed in 1031 due to political divisions and civil unrest during the rule of Hicham II, who was ousted because of his indolence. Al-Andalus then broke up into a number of states called Taifa kingdoms, Arabic, Muluk al-Tawaif. English, petty kingdoms. the decomposition of the caliphate into those petty kingdoms weakened the Muslims in the Iberian Peninsula vis-à-vis the Christian kingdoms of the north. Some of the Taifas, such as that of Seville, were forced to enter into alliances with Christian princes and pay tributes in money to Castile.
Emirs of Córdoba.
Abd al-Rahman ibn Bedr, a former Greek slave, escaped with their lives after the popular revolt known as the Abbasid Revolution. Rahman I continued south through Palestine, the Sinai, and then into Egypt. Rahman I was one of several surviving Umayyad family members to make a perilous trek to Ifriqiya at this time. Rahman I and Bedr reached modern-day Morocco near Ceuta. Next step would be to cross to sea to Al-Andalus, where Rahman I could not have been sure whether he would be welcome. Following the Berber Revolt, 740s, the province was in a state of confusion, with the Ummah torn by tribal dissensions among the Arabs and racial tensions between the Arabs and Berbers. Bedr lined up three Syrian commanders, Ubayd Allah ibn Uthman and Abd Allah ibn Khalid, both originally of Damascus, and Yusuf ibn Bukht of Qanazrin, and contacted al-Samail, then in Zaragoza, to get his consent, but al-Samail refused, fearing Rahman I would try to make himself emir. After discussion with Yemenite commanders, Rahman I was told to go to Al-Andalus. Shortly thereafter, he set off with Bedr and a small group of followers for Europe. Abd al-Rahman landed at Almunikar in Al-Andalus, to the east of Malaga. During his brief time in Malaga, he quickly amassed local support. News of the prince's arrival spread throughout the peninsula. In order to help speed his ascension to power, he took advantage of the feuds and dissensions. However, before anything could be done, trouble broke out in northern Al-Andalus. Abd al-Rahman and his followers were able to control Zaragoza. Rahman I fought to rule Al-Andalus in a battle at the Guadalquivir River, just outside of Córdoba on the plains of Musera, Battle of Musera. Rahman I was victorious, chasing his enemies from the field with parts of their army. Rahman I marched into the capital, Córdoba, fighting off a counterattack, but negotiations ended the confrontation. After Rahman I consolidated power, he proclaimed himself the Al-Andalus Emir. Rahman I did not claim the Muslim caliph, though. The last step was to have al-Fihri's general, al-Samail, garroted in Córdoba's jail. Al-Andalus was a safe haven for the House of Umayyad that managed to evade the Abbasids. In Baghdad, the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur had planned to depose the emir. Rahman I and his army confronted the Abbasids, killing most of the Abbasid army. The main Abbasid leaders were decapitated, their heads preserved in salt, with identifying tags pinned to their ears. The heads were bundled in a gruesome package and sent to the Abbasid Caliph, who was on pilgrimage at Mecca. Rahman I quelled repeated rebellions in Al-Andalus. He began the building of the Great Mosque, and formed shipyards along the coast. He is moreover said to have been the first to transplant the palm and the pomegranate into the congenial climate of Spain, and he encouraged science and literature in his states. This good king died on the 29th of September, 788. After a reign of 34 years and 1 month. Rahman I's successor was his son Hisham I. Born in Córdoba, he built many mosques and completed the Mezhuerta. He called for a jihad that resulted in a campaign against the Kingdom of Asturias and the county of Toulouse. In this second campaign he was defeated at Orange by William of Gallon, first cousin to Charlemagne. His successor al-Hakam I came to power and was challenged by his uncles, other sons of Rahman I. Abdullah, went to the court of Charlemagne in Aix-la-Chapelle to negotiate for aid. In the meantime Córdoba was attacked, but was defended. Hakam I spent much of his reign suppressing rebellions in Toledo, Saragossa and Merida. Abd al-Rahman II succeeded his father and engaged in nearly continuous warfare against Alfonso II of Asturias, whose southward advance he halted. Rahman II repulsed an assault by Vikings who had disembarked in Cadiz, conquered Seville, with the exception of his citadel, and attacked Córdoba. Thereafter he constructed a fleet and naval arsenal at Seville to repel future raids. He responded to William of Septimania's requests of assistance in his struggle against Charles the Bald's nominations. Muhammad I's reign was marked by the movements of the Muladi, ethnic Iberian Muslims, and Mozarabs, Muslim Iberia Christians. Muhammad I was succeeded by his son Muntir I. During the reign of his father, Muntir I commanded military operations against the neighboring Christian kingdoms and the Muladi rebellions. At his father's death, he inherited the throne. During his 2-year reign, Muntir I fought against Umar ibn Hafsun. He died in 888 at Bobastro, succeeded by his brother Abdullah ibn Muhammad al-Umawi. Umawi showed no reluctance to dispose of those he viewed as a threat. His government was marked by continuous wars between Arabs, Berbers and Muladi. His power as emir was confined to the area of Córdoba, while the rest had been seized by rebel families. The son he had designated as successor was killed by one of Umawi's brothers. The latter was in turn executed by Umawi's father, who named as successor Abd ar-Rahman III, son of the killed son of Umawi.
Caliphs at Córdoba.
Rahman III, to help in his fight against the invasion by the Fatimids, claimed the caliphate in opposition to the generally recognized Abbasid Caliph of Baghdad.
Almohad Caliphs. The Crusades.
Beginning in the 8th century, the Iberian Christian kingdoms had begun the reconquista aimed at retaking Al-Andalus from the Moors. In 1095, Pope Urban II, inspired by the conquests in Spain by Christian forces and implored by the Eastern Roman Emperor to help defend Christianity in the East, called for the First Crusade from Western Europe, which captured Edessa, Antioch, County of Tripoli and Jerusalem. In the early period of the Crusades, the Christian Kingdom of Jerusalem emerged and for a time controlled Jerusalem. The Kingdom of Jerusalem and other smaller Crusader kingdoms over the next 90 years formed part of the complicated politics of the Levant, but did not threaten the Islamic Caliphate nor other powers in the region. After Shirki ended Fatimid rule in 1169, uniting it with Syria, the Crusader kingdoms were faced with a threat, and his nephew Saladin reconquered most of the area in 1187, leaving the Crusaders holding a few ports. In the Third Crusade, armies from Europe failed to recapture Jerusalem, though Crusader states lingered for several decades, and other crusades followed. The Christian reconquista continued in Al-Andalus, and was eventually completed with the fall of Granada in 1492. During the low period of the Crusades, the Fourth Crusade was diverted from the Levant and instead took Constantinople, leaving the Eastern Roman Empire, now the Byzantine Empire, further weakened in their long struggle against the Turkish peoples to the east. However, the Crusaders did manage to damage Islamic caliphates. According to William of Malmesbury, preventing them from further expansion into Christendom and being targets of the Mamluks and the Mongols.
Ayyubid dynasty.
The Ayyubid dynasty was founded by Saladin and centered in Egypt. In 1174, Saladin proclaimed himself Sultan and conquered the Near East region. The Ayyubids ruled much of the Middle East during the 12th and 13th centuries, controlling Egypt, Syria, northern Mesopotamia, Hejaz, Yemen, and the North African coast up to the borders of modern-day Tunisia. After Saladin, his sons contested control over the Sultanate, but Saladin's brother Al-Adil eventually established himself in 1200. In the 1230s, Syria's Ayyubid rulers attempted to win independence from Egypt and remained divided until Egyptian Sultan As-Salamib restored Ayyubid unity by taking over most of Syria, excluding Aleppo, by 1247. In 1250, the dynasty in the Egyptian region was overthrown by slave regiments. A number of attempts to recover it failed, led by An-Nasir Yusuf of Aleppo. In 1260, the Mongols sacked Aleppo and wrested control of what remained of the Ayyubid territories soon after.
Emirs of Aleppo. Mongol invasions.
After the Crusades, the Mongols invaded in the 13th century, marking the end of the Islamic Golden Age. Some historians assert that the Eastern Islamic world never fully recovered. Under the leadership of Genghis Khan, the Mongols put an end to the Abbasid era. The Mongol invasion of Central Asia began in 1219 at a huge cost in civilian life and economic devastation. The Mongols spread throughout Central Asia and Persia. The Persian city of Isfahan had fallen to them by 1237. With the election of Khan Monk in 1251, Mongol targeted the Abbasid capital, Baghdad. Monk's brother, Hulagu, was made leader of the Mongol army assigned to the task of subduing Baghdad. The fall of Baghdad in 1258 destroyed what had been the largest city in Islam. The last Abbasid caliph, Al-Musta'sim, was captured and killed, and Baghdad was ransacked and destroyed. The cities of Damascus and Aleppo fell in 1260. Plans for the conquest of Egypt were delayed due to the death of the monk at around the same time. The Abbasid army lost to the superior Mongol army, but the invaders were finally stopped by Egyptian Mamluks north of Jerusalem in 1260 at the pivotal Battle of Ain Jalut. Ultimately, the Ilkhanate, Golden Horde, and the Chagatai Khanate, three of the four principal Mongol Khanates, embraced Islam. In power in Syria, Mesopotamia, Persia and further east, over the rest of the 13th century gradually all converted to Islam. Most Ilkhanate rulers were replaced by the new Mongol power founded by Timur, himself a Muslim, who conquered Persia in the 1360s, and moved against the Delhi Sultanate in India and the Ottoman Turks in Anatolia. His invasions were equally destructive, sacking Baghdad, Damascus, Delhi and many other cities, with enormous loss of life. Timur had attacked areas still recovering from the Black Death, which may have killed one-third of the population of the Middle East. The plague began in China, and reached Alexandria in Egypt in 1347, spreading over the following years to most Islamic areas. The combination of the plague and the wars left the Middle East and Islamic world in a seriously weakened position. The Timurid dynasty would found many branches of Islam, including the Mughals of India.
The Mamluks.
In 1250, the Umayyad Egyptian dynasty was overthrown by slave regiments, and the Mamluk Sultanate was born. In the 1260s, the Mongols sacked and controlled the Islamic Near East territories. The Mamluks, who were Turkic, forced out the Mongols, see Battle of Ain Jalut, after the final destruction of the Umayyad dynasty. Thus they united Syria and Egypt for the longest interval between the Abbasid and Ottoman empires, 1250 to 1517. The Mamluks experienced a continual state of political conflict, military tension, proxy wars, and economic competition between the Muslim territory, Dar al-Islam, and non-Muslim territory, Dar al-Harb. As part of their chosen role as defenders of Islamic orthodoxy, the Mamluks sponsored many religious buildings, including mosques, madrasas and khanqahs. Though some construction took place in the provinces, the vast bulk of these projects expanded the capital. Many Mamluk buildings in Cairo have survived to this day, particularly in Old Cairo.
Bahri Sultans.
A former Mamluk slave who was born a prince, Ibach, known as Lion of Ain Jalut, replaced the Mamluks in 1250. Ibach, by then a general, married Shajar al-Jur, the widow of Umayyad Caliph al-Salam. Military prestige was at the center of Mamluk society, and it played a key role in the confrontations with the Mongol forces. After Ibach's assassination and the accession of Qutuz in 1259, the Mamluks challenged and routed the Mongols at the Battle of Ain Jalut in late 1260. The Mongols were again defeated by the Mamluks at the Battle of Hims a few months later, and then driven out of Syria altogether. With this, the Mamluks were able to concentrate their forces and to conquer the last of the Crusader territories in the Levant.
Burji Sultans.
The global Muslim population had reached about 8% of the world total as against the Christian population of 14% by 1400.
Africa.
The Umayyad conquest of North Africa continued the century of rapid Muslim military expansion following the death of Muhammad in 632. By 640 the Arabs controlled Mesopotamia, had invaded Armenia, and were concluding their conquest of Byzantine Syria. Damascus was the seat of the Umayyad Caliphate. By the end of 641 all of Egypt was in Arab hands.
Horn of Africa.
The history of Islam in the Horn of Africa is almost as old as the faith itself. through extensive trade and social interactions with their converted Muslim trading partners on the other side of the Red Sea, in the Arabian Peninsula, merchants and sailors in the Horn region gradually came under the influence of the new religion. Early Islamic disciples fled to the port city of Zila in modern-day northern Somalia to seek protection from the Quraysh at the court of the Aksumite emperor in present-day Somalia. Some of the Muslims that were granted protection are said to have then settled in several parts of the Horn region to promote the religion. The victory of the Muslims over the Quraysh in the 7th century had a significant impact on local merchants and sailors, as their trading partners in Arabia had by then all adopted Islam, and the major trading routes in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea came under the sway of the Muslim caliphs. Instability in the Arabian Peninsula saw further migrations of early Muslim families to the Somali seaboard. These clans came to serve as catalysts, forwarding the faith to large parts of the Horn region.
Maghreb.
Kairouan in Tunisia was the first city founded by Muslims in the Maghreb. Arab general Akbar ibn Nafi erected the city in 670, and, in the same time, the Great Mosque of Kairouan considered as the oldest and most prestigious sanctuary in the Western Islamic world. This part of Islamic territory has had independent governments during most of Islamic history. The Idrisid were the first Arab rulers in the Western Maghreb, Morocco, ruling from 788 to 985. The dynasty is named after its first sultan Idris I. The Almoravid dynasty was a Berber dynasty from the Sahara flourished over a wide area of northwestern Africa and the Iberian Peninsula during the 11th century. Under this dynasty the Moorish Empire was extended over present-day Morocco, Western Sahara, Mauritania, Gibraltar, Tlemcen, in Algeria, and a part of what is now Senegal and Mali in the south, and Spain and Portugal in the north. The Almohad dynasty or the Unitarians, were a Berber Muslim religious power which founded the 5th Moorish dynasty in the 12th century, and conquered all northern Africa as far as Egypt, together with Al-Andalus.
Great Lakes.
Islam came to the Great Lakes region of southeastern Africa along existing trade routes. They learned from them the manners of the Muslims and this led to their conversion by the Muslim Arabs. Local Islamic government centered in Tanzania, then Zanzibar. The people of Zayd were Muslims that immigrated to the Great Lakes region. In the pre-colonial period, the structure of Islamic authority here was held up through the ulama, one or ionis, in Swahili language. These leaders had some degree of authority over most of the Muslims in Southeast Africa before territorial boundaries were established. The chief Qadi there was recognized for having the final religious authority.
West Africa.
Much later, Usman Dan Fodio after the Fulani War, found himself in command of the largest state in Africa, the Fulani Empire. Dan Fodio worked to establish an efficient government grounded in Islamic laws. Already aged at the beginning of the war, he retired in 1815 passing the title of Sultan of Sokoto to his son Muhammad Bello.
Asia and the Far East. South Asia.
On the Indian subcontinent, Islam first appeared in the southwestern tip of the peninsula, in today's Kerala state. Arabs traded with Malabar even before the birth of Muhammad. Native legends say that a group of Sahaba, under Malik ibn Dinar, arrived on the Malabar coast and preached Islam. According to that legend, the first mosque of India was built by second Chera King Cheraman Perumal, who accepted Islam and received the name Tajuddin. He traveled to Arabia to meet Muhammad and died on the trip back, somewhere in today's Oman. Historical records suggest that the Cheraman Perumal Mosque was built in around 629. Islamic rule came to India in the 8th century, when Muhammad bin Qasim conquered Sindh. Muslim conquests expanded under Mahmud and the Ghaznavids until the late 12th century, when the Urids overran the Ghaznavids and extended the conquests in northern India. Qutb ud-Din Aibar conquered Delhi in 1206 and began the reign of the Delhi Sultanates. In the 14th century, Alauddin Khilji extended Muslim rule south to Gujarat, Rajasthan and Deccan. Various other Muslim dynasties also formed and ruled across India from the 13th to the 18th century, such as the Qutb Shahi and the Bahmani, but none rivaled the power and extensive reach of the Mughal Empire at its peak.
China.
In China, four Sahabas, Sa'id ibn Abi Waqas, Wahb Abu Kabqar, Ja'far ibn Abu Talib and Jahsh, preached in 616/17 and onwards after following the Chittagong Kamuk Minipa route after sailing from Abyssinia in 615/16. After conquering Persia in 636, Sa'id ibn Abi Waqas went with Zayd ibn Zayd, Qais ibn Zad and Hassan ibn Abit to China in 637, taking the complete Quran. Sa'id ibn Abi Waqas headed for China for the third time in 650/51 after Caliph Uthman asked him to lead an embassy to China, which the Chinese emperor received.
Southeast Asia.
Islam first reached maritime Southeast Asia through traders from Mecca in the 7th century CE, particularly via the western part of what is now Indonesia. Arab traders from Yemen already had a presence in Asia through trading and sea traveling by sea, serving as intermediary traders to and from Europe and Africa. They traded not only Arabian goods but also from Africa, India, and so on, including ivory, fragrances, spices, and gold. According to T.W. Arnold in The Preaching of Islam, by the 2nd century of the Islamic calendar, Arab traders had been trading with the inhabitants of Ceylon. The same argument has been told by Dr. B. H. Berger and Dr. Mr. Prayudi in Sejarah Economis Sociologis Indonesia, History of Socio-Economic of Indonesia, according to the atlas by geographer Al-Biruni, 973–1048, the Indian or Indonesia Ocean used to be called the Persian Ocean. After the Western imperialist ruled, it is replaced Persian Ocean to be Indian Ocean. Soon, many Sufi missionaries translated classical Sufi literature from Arabic and Persian into Malay. A tangible product of this is the Joy script. Coupled with the composing of original Islamic literature in Malay, this led the way to the transformation of Malay into an Islamic language. By 1292, when Marco Polo visited Sumatra, most of the inhabitants had converted to Islam. The Sultanate of Malacca was founded on the Malay Peninsula by Parameswara, a Srivijayan prince. Through trade and commerce, Islam then spread to Borneo and Java. By the late 15th century, Islam had been introduced to the Philippines via the southern island of Mindanao. The foremost socio-cultural Muslim entities that resulted from this are the present-day Sultanate of Sulu and Sultanate of Maguindanao. Islamized kingdoms in the northern Luzon Island, such as the Kingdom of Manila and the Kingdom of Tondo, were later conquered and Christianized, with the majority of the archipelago by Spanish colonizers beginning in the 16th century. As Islam spread, societal changes developed from the individual conversions, and 5 centuries later it emerged as a dominant cultural and political power in the region. 3 main Muslim political powers emerged. The Aceh Sultanate was the most important, controlling much of the area between Southeast Asia and India from its center in northern Sumatra. The Sultanate also attracted Sufi poets. The second Muslim power was the Sultanate of Malacca on the Malay Peninsula. The Sultanate of Demak on Java was the third power, where the emerging Muslim forces defeated the local Majapahit kingdom in the early 16th century. Although the Sultanate managed to expand its territory somewhat, its rule remained brief. Portuguese forces captured Malacca in 1511 under Naval General Afonso de Albuquerque. With Malacca subdued, the Aceh Sultanate and Bruneian Empire established themselves as centers of Islam in Southeast Asia. The Sultanate's territory, although vastly diminished, remains intact to this day as the modern state of Brunei Darussalam.
Fragmentation period. 3 early modern empires.
In the 15th and 16th centuries 3 major Muslim empires formed, the Ottoman Empire in the Middle East, the Balkans and Northern Africa, the Safavid Empire in Greater Iran, and the Mughal Empire in South Asia. These imperial powers were made possible by the discovery and exploitation of gunpowder and more efficient administration. By the end of the 19th century, all three had declined, and by the early 20th century, with the Ottomans' defeat in World War I, the last Muslim empire collapsed. Dar al-Ard, House of Truce, began to develop in the Ottoman Empire's relationship with its tributary states. In the contemporary national period, the term referred to non-Muslim governments that had armistice or peace agreements with Muslim governments. Today, the actual status of the non-Muslim country in question may vary from acknowledged equality to tributary states.
Mughal Empire.
The Mughal Empire was a product of various Central Asian invasions into the Indian subcontinent. It was founded by the Timurid Prince Babur in 1526 with the destruction of the Delhi Sultanate, placing its capital in Agra. Babur's death some years later and the indecisive rule of his son, Humayun, brought instability to Mughal rule. The resistance of the Afghani Shah, who administered a string of defeats to Humayun, weakened the empire. A year before his death, however, Humayun managed to recover much of the lost territories, leaving a substantial legacy for his son, the 13-year-old Akbar, later known as Akbar the Great, in 1556. Under Akbar, consolidation of the Mughal Empire occurred through both expansion and administrative reforms. After Akbar, Jahangir and Shahjahan came to power. Subsequently, Aurangzeb ruled vast areas including Afghanistan, Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. The empire ruled most of present-day India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Afghanistan for several centuries. Its decline in the early 18th century allowed India to be divided into smaller kingdoms and states. The Mughal dynasty was dissolved by the British Empire after the Indian Rebellion of 1857. It left a lasting legacy on Indian culture and architecture. Famous buildings built by the Mughals include the Taj Mahal, the Red Fort, the Badshahi Mosque, the Lahore Fort, the Shalimar Gardens and the Agra Fort. During the empire's reign, Muslim communities flourished all over India, in Gujarat, Bengal and Hyderabad. Various Sufi orders from Afghanistan and Persia were active throughout the region. More than a quarter of the population converted to Islam.
Safavid Empire.
The Safavid dynasty rose to power in Tabriz in 1501 and later conquered the rest of Iran. The Safavids were originally Sufi and Iran was Sunni. After their defeat at the hands of the Sunni Ottomans at the Battle of Caldiran, to unite the Persians behind him, Ismail I made conversion mandatory for the largely Sunni population to 12 Shias so that he could get them to fight the Sunni Ottomans. This resulted in the Safavid conversion of Iran to Shia Islam. Zaydis, the largest group amongst the Shia before the Safavid dynasty, were also forced to convert to the 12 Shia. The Zaydis at that time used the Hanafi fiqh, as did most Sunnis, and there were good relations between them. Abu Hanifa and Zayd ibn Ali were also very good friends. The Zaydis were also forced to convert. The Safavids dynasty from Azerbaijan ruled from 1501 to 1736, and which established 12 Shia Islam as the region's official religion and united its provinces under a single sovereignty, thereby reigniting the Persian identity. Although claiming to be the descendants of Ali ibn Abu Talib, the Safavids were Sunni. The name Safavid comes from a Sufi order called Safavi. Their origins go back to Firoz Shah Zarinkola, a local dignitary from the north. During their rule, the Safavids recognized 12 Shia Islam as the state religion, thus giving the region a separate identity from its Sunni neighbors. In 1524, Tahmasp acceded to the throne, initiating a revival of the arts. Carpet making became a major industry. The tradition of Persian miniature painting in manuscripts reached its peak, until Tahmasp turned to strict religious observance in middle age, prohibiting the consumption of alcohol and hashish and removing casinos, taverns and brothels. Tahmasp's nephew Ibrahim Tsa continued to patronize a last flowering of the arts until he was murdered, after which many artists were recruited by the Mughal dynasty. Tahmasp's grandson, Shah Abbas I, restored the shrine of the 8th 12 Shah Imam, Ali al-Rida at Mashhad, and restored the dynastic shrine at Ardebal. Both shrines received jewelry, fine manuscripts and Chinese porcelains. Abbas moved the capital to Isfahan, revived old ports, and established thriving trade with Europeans. Amongst Abbas's most visible cultural achievements was the construction of Naqsh Square, design of the world. The plaza, located near a Friday mosque, covered 20 acres, 81,000 m². The Safavid dynasty was toppled in 1722 by the Hotarki dynasty, which ended their forceful conversion of Sunni areas to Shiaism.
Salafi.
In the 18th century a reform and revival movement was initiated led by Ibn Abd al-Wahhab in today's Saudi Arabia. Referred to as Wahhabi, their self-designation as Muwahhidun, Unitarians. Building upon earlier efforts such as those by the logician Ibn Taymiyyah and Ibn al-Qayyim, the movement seeks to uphold monotheism and purify Islam of later innovations. Their zeal against idolatrous shrines led to the destruction of sacred tombs in Mecca and Medina, including those of Muhammad's companions.
Ottoman Empire.
The Seljuk Turks declined in the second half of the 13th century, after the Mongol invasion. This resulted in the establishment of multiple Turkish principalities, known as beyliks. Osman I, the founder of the Ottoman dynasty, assumed leadership of one of these principalities, Skut, in 1281, succeeding his father Ertugrul. Declaring an independent Ottoman emirate in 1299, Osman I afterwards led it in a series of battles with the Byzantine Empire. By 1331, the Ottomans had captured Nicosia, the former Byzantine capital, under the leadership of Osman's son and successor. Orhan I. Victory at the Battle of Kosovo against the Serbs in 1389 then facilitated their expansion into Europe. The Ottomans were established in the Balkans and Anatolia by the time Bayezid I ascended to power in the same year, now at the helm of a growing empire. Growth halted when Mongol warlord Timur, also known as Tamerlane, captured Bayezid I in the Battle of Ankara in 1402, beginning the Ottoman interregnum. This episode was characterized by the division of the Ottoman territory amongst Bayezid I's sons, who submitted to Timurid authority. When a number of Ottoman territories regained independent status, ruin for the empire loomed. However, the empire recovered, as the youngest son of Bayezid I, Mehmed I, waged offensive campaigns against his ruling brothers, thereby reuniting Asia Minor and declaring himself Sultan in 1413. Around this time the Ottoman naval fleet developed, such that they were able to challenge Venice, a naval power. They also attempted to reconquer the Balkans. By the time of Mehmed I's grandson, Mehmed II, ruled 1444, 1446. 1451, 1481, the Ottomans could lay siege to Constantinople, the capital of Byzantium. A factor in this siege was the use of muskets and large cannons introduced by the Ottomans. The Byzantine fortress succumbed in 1453, after 54 days of siege. Mehmed II renamed it Istanbul. Without its capital the Byzantine Empire disintegrated. The future successes of the Ottomans and later empires would depend upon the exploitation of gunpowder. In the early 16th century, the Shiite Safavid dynasty assumed control in Persia under the leadership of Shah Ismail I, defeating the ruling Turkoman Federation at Komanlu, also called the White Sheep Turkomans, in 1501. The Ottoman Sultan Selim I sought to repel Safavid expansion, challenging and defeating them at the Battle of Caldiran in 1514. Selim I also deposed the ruling Mamluks in Egypt, absorbing their territories in 1517. Sulayman I, also known as Sulayman the Magnificent, Selim I's successor, took advantage of the diversion of Safavid focus to the Uzbeks on the eastern frontier and recaptured Baghdad, which had fallen under Safavid control. Despite this, Safavid power remained substantial, rivaling the Ottomans. Sulayman I advanced deep into Hungary following the Battle of Moax in 1526, reaching as far as the gates of Vienna thereafter, and signed a Franco-Ottoman alliance with Francis I of France against Charles V of the Roman Empire 10 years later. Sulayman I's rule, 1520-1566, was the apex of the Ottoman Empire. The rapid European industrialization thereafter sent it into a relative decline. It was recognized as a superpower, even at the time of its decline and eventual demise after World War I.
Modern history.
The modern age brought technological and organizational changes to Europe while the Islamic region continued the patterns of earlier centuries. The great powers globalized economically and colonized much of the region.
Ottoman Empire partition.
By the end of the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire had declined. The decision to back Germany in World War I meant they shared the Central Powers' defeat in that war. The defeat led to the overthrow of the Ottomans by Turkish nationalists led by the victorious general of the Battle of Gallipoli, Mustafa Kemal, who became known to his people as Ataturk, father of the Turks. Ataturk was credited with renegotiating the Treaty of Sèvres, 1920, which ended Turkey's involvement in the war and establishing the modern Republic of Turkey, which was recognized by the Allies in the Treaty of Lausanne, 1923. Ataturk went on to implement an ambitious program of modernization that emphasized economic development and secularization. He transformed Turkish culture to reflect European laws, adopted Hindu-Arabic numerals, the Latin script, separated the religious establishment from the state, and emancipated women, even giving them the right to vote in parallel with women's suffrage in the West. Following World War I, the vast majority of former Ottoman territory outside of Asia Minor was handed over to the victorious European powers as protectorates. During the war the Allies had promised the subject peoples independence in exchange for their assistance fighting the Turkish powers. To their dismay, they found that this system of protectorates was a smokescreen for their continued subjugation by the British and the French. The struggles for independence from their Turkish overlords and the cooperation of partisan forces with the British were romanticized in the stories of British secret intelligence agent T.E. Lawrence, later known as Lawrence of Arabia. Ottoman successor states include today's Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Egypt, Greece, Iraq, Lebanon, Romania, Saudi Arabia, Serbia, Syria, Jordan, Turkey, Balkan states, North Africa and the North Shore of the Black Sea. Many Muslim countries sought to adopt European political organization and nationalism began to emerge in the Muslim world. Countries like Egypt, Syria and Turkey organized their governments sought to develop national pride amongst their citizens. Other places, like Iraq, were not as successful due to a lack of unity and an inability to resolve age-old prejudices between Muslim sects and against non-Muslims. Some Muslim countries, such as Turkey and Egypt, sought to separate Islam from the secular government. In other cases, such as Saudi Arabia, the government brought out religious expression in the re-emergence of the puritanical form of Sunni Islam known to its detractors as Wahhabism, which found its way into the Saudi royal family.
Indian partition.
The partition of India refers to the creation in August 1947 of the now sovereign states of India and Pakistan. The two nations were formed out of the former British Raj, including treaty states, when Britain granted independence to the area, see Undivided India. In particular, the term refers to the partition of Bengal and Punjab, the two main provinces of what would be Pakistan. In 1947, after the partition of India, Pakistan became the largest Islamic country in the world, by population, and the 10th largest post-World War II state in the modern world. In 1971, after a bloody war of independence, the Bengal part of Pakistan became an independent state called Bangladesh. Pakistan in the contemporary era is the second largest Islamic country in the world, following Indonesia. Pakistan is a declared nuclear power, being the only Muslim nation to have that status.
Post-1945 era.
Between 1953 and 1964, King Saud reorganized the government of the monarchy his father, Ibn Saud, had created. Saudi Arabia's ministries included communication, 1953, agriculture and water, 1953, petroleum, 1960, pilgrimage and Islamic endowments, 1960, labor and social affairs, 1962, and Information, 1963. He also put Talal, one of his many younger brothers, 29 years his junior, in charge of the Ministry of Transport. Indiana, 1958-59, Talal proposed the formation of a national council. As he proposed it, it would have been a consultative body, not a legislature. Still, he thought of it as a first step toward broader popular participation in the government. Talal presented this proposal to the king when the crown prince was out of the country. Saud forwarded the proposal to the ulama asking them whether a national council was a legitimate institution in Islam. The idea then disappeared until it was revived more than 3 decades later. A consultative council came into existence in 1992. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries came into existence in 1960. For the first decade or more of its existence, it was unable to increase revenue for the member nations. Tension between Faisal and Saud continued to mount until a showdown in 1964. Saud threatened to mobilize the Royal Guard against Faisal and Faisal threatened to mobilize the National Guard against Saud. Saud then abdicated and left for Cairo, then Greece, where he would die in 1969. Faisal then became king. The Six-Day War of June 5 to 10, 1967, was fought between Israel and the neighboring states of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. It closed the Suez Canal, and may have contributed to the revolution in Libya that put Muammar Gaddafi in power. It led in May 1970 to the closure of the tap line from Saudi Arabia through Syria to Lebanon. These developments had the effect of increasing the importance of petroleum in Libya, which is a short, and canal-free, shipping distance from Europe. In 1970, Occidental Petroleum broke with other oil companies and accepted Gaddafi's demands for price increases. In October 1973, another war between Israel and its Muslim neighbors, known as the Yom Kippur War, broke out just as oil company began meeting with OPEC leaders. OPEC had been emboldened by the success of Libya's demands and the war strengthened their unity. The Arab defeats in 1967 and 1973 triggered the 1973 oil crisis. In response to the emergency resupply effort by the West that enabled Israel to defeat Egyptian and Syrian forces, the Arab world imposed the 1973 oil embargo against the United States and Western Europe. Faisal agreed that Saudi Arabia would use some of its oil wealth to finance the frontline states, those that bordered Israel, in their struggle. The centrality of petroleum, the Arab-Israeli conflict and political and economic instability and uncertainty remain constant features of the politics of the region.
Persian revolutions.
The Iranian constitutional revolution took place between 1905 and 1911. The revolution marked the beginning of the end of Iran's feudalistic society and led to the establishment of a parliament in Persia and the restriction of the power of the Shah, king. Iran approved its first constitution at this time. The modernist and conservative blocs then began to fight with each other. World War I intervened and all of the combatants invaded Iran. This weakened the government and threatened the country's independence. The constitutional monarchy created by the decree of Muzaffar al-Din Shah that was established in Persia as a result of the revolution, was damaged in 1925 with the dissolution of the Qajar dynasty and the ascension of Reza Shah Pahlavi to the throne. In 1979 the Iranian Revolution transformed Iran from a constitutional monarchy, under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, to a populist theocratic Islamic republic under the rule of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a Shi'i Muslim cleric and Marja. Following the revolution, and a new constitution was approved and a referendum established the government, electing Ruhollah Khomeini as supreme leader. During the following 2 years, liberals, leftists, and Islamic groups fought each other, and the Islamics captured power. Gulf states such as Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, despite being hostile to Iraq, encouraged Saddam Hussein to invade Iran, which resulted in the Iran-Iraq War, as they feared that an Islamic revolution would take place within their own borders. Certain Iranian exiles also helped convince Saddam that if he invaded, the fledgling Islamic Republic would quickly collapse.
National period. Arab-Israeli conflict.
The Arab-Israeli conflict spans about a century of political tensions and open hostilities. It involves the establishment of the modern State of Israel as a Jewish nation-state, the consequent displacement of the Palestinian people, as well as the adverse relationship between the Arab states and the State of Israel. See related Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Despite at first involving only the Arab states bordering Israel, animosity has also developed between Israel and other predominantly Muslim states. Many countries, individuals and non-governmental organizations elsewhere in the world feel involved in this conflict for reasons such as cultural and religious ties with Islam, Arab culture, Christianity, Judaism, Jewish culture, or for ideological, human rights, or strategic reasons. Although some consider the Arab-Israeli conflict a part of, or a precursor to, a wider clash of civilizations between the Western world and the Muslim world, others oppose this view. Animosity emanating from this conflict has caused numerous attacks on supporters, or perceived supporters, of each side by supporters of the other side in many countries around the world.
Salafi and the Safavid.
Some have argued that the development of the two opposite fringes, the Safavid conversion of Iran to Shia Islam, the 12-verse Shia version, and its reinforcement by the Iranian Revolution, and the Salafi in Saudi Arabia, coupled with the Iran-Saudi Arabia relations, resulted in these governments using sectarian conflict to enhance their political interests. Many have argued that these governments, themselves do not conform to Islamic economic jurisprudence, and continue to deal in usury and in government bonds. While their rulers like Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani and some ayatollahs in Iran on the list of Iranian people by net worth and the House of Saud, accumulated huge personal wealth that some have argued is at odds with the Islamic message preached by Muhammad and the Quran. Wealth that some think should belong in Bait al-Mal or the welfare state. The Bait al-Mal or the welfare state was for the Muslim and non-Muslim poor, needy, elderly, orphans, widows, and the disabled. The Bait al-Mal ran for hundreds of years under the Rashidun Caliphate in the 7th century and continued through the Umayyad period and well into the Abbasid era.
Anatolian region.
Since the establishment of the Republic of Turkey in 1923, there has been a strong tradition of secularism in Turkey established and institutionalized by Ataturk's reforms. Although the First Grand National Assembly of Turkey had rallied support from the population for the independence war against the occupying forces on behalf of Islamic principles, Islam was omitted from the public sphere after the independence war. The principle of secularism was thus inserted in the Turkish constitution as late as 1937. This legal action was assisted by stringent state policies against domestic Islamist groups and establishments to neutralize the strong appeal of Islam in Turkish society. Even though an overwhelming majority of the population, at least nominally, adheres to Islam in Turkey, the state, which was established with the Kemalist ideology, has no official religion nor promotes any, and it monitors the area between the religions using the Presidency of Religious Affairs. The Republic protests were a series of mass rallies by Turkish secular citizens that took place in Turkey in 2007. The target of the first protest was the possible presidential candidacy of the Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan, afraid that if elected President of Turkey Erdogan would alter the Turkish secularist state.